one of the things you want to do with a conception like compassion is you actually want to start thinking about it like a psychologist or like a scientist, because compassion is actually definable. And I think the easiest way to approach it is to think about it in big five terms, because it maps onto agreeableness. And especially, you can break agreeableness down into compassion and politeness. And the liberal types, especially the social justice types, are way higher in compassion. It's actually their fundamental characteristic. And you might think, well, compassion is a virtue. It's like, yes, it is a virtue. But any unidimensional virtue immediately becomes a vice, because real virtue is the intermingling of a number of virtues and their integration into a functional identity that can be expressed socially. And compassion is great if you happen to be the entity towards which it is directed. But compassion tends to divide the world into crying children and predatory snakes. Right, and so if you're a crying child, hey, great, man. But if you happen to be identified as one of the predatory snakes, you better look the hell out. And so, compassion is what the mother grizzly bear feels for her cubs when she eats you because you got in the way. Right, exactly. So no, we don't want to be thinking for a second that compassion isn't a virtue that could lead to violence, because it certainly can. And the other problem with compassion, this is why we have conscientiousness, right? There's 5 canonical personality dimensions. Agreeableness is pretty good if you're dealing, again, in a kin system. You want to distribute resources equally, for example, among your children, because you want all of them to have not only the same chance, you even want them roughly to have the same outcome, a good one. But the problem is you can't extend that moral network to larger groups, not as far as I can tell. You need conscientiousness, which is a much colder virtue. And it's also a virtue that's much more concerned with larger structures over the longer period of time. So, and you can think about conscientiousness as a form of compassion too. It's a strange form. It's like, straighten the hell up and work hard and your life will go well. It's like, I don't care how you feel about that right now. And like someone who's cold, low in agreeableness, say, and high in conscientiousness, that's what they'll tell you every time. Don't come whining to me. I don't care about your hurt feelings. Do your goddamn job or you're going to be out on the street. You think, oh, that person's being really hard on me. It's like, not necessarily. They might have your long-term best interest in mind. And you're fortunate if you come across someone who's like not tyrannically disagreeable, but moderately disagreeable and high in conscientiousness, because they'll whip you into shape. And that's really helpful. I mean, you'll admire people like that. You won't be able to help it, and you think, oh wow, this person's actually giving me good information, even though, you feel like a slug after they've taken you apart. So, okay, so that's the compassion issue. It's like you can't just transform that into a political stance. And I think part of what we're seeing is actually the rise of a form of female totalitarianism. So we have no idea what totalitarianism would be like if women ran it, because that's never happened before in the history of the planet. And so we've introduced women into the political sphere radically over the last 50 years. We have no idea what the consequence of that is going to be, but we do know from our research, which is preliminary, that agreeableness really predicts political correctness, but female gender predicts over and above the personality trait, and that's something we found very rarely in our research. Usually the sex differences are wiped out by the personality differences, but not in this particular case. And then, women are getting married later, and they're having children much later, and they're having fewer of them. And so you also have to wonder what their feminine orientation is doing with itself in the interim, roughly speaking. And a lot of it's being expressed as political opinion. Like, fair enough, that's fine. But it's not fine when it starts to shut down discussion.